Welcome to the YouTube channel of Legally Trust. This video is one of the series of educational videos that will be available on this channel under the category General Awareness.
Hello friends, today we'll be covering the topic of vicarious liability. The famous maxim behind vicarious liability is qui facit perficit alium per se. He who doesn't act through others does it himself. Now the main principle behind vicarious liability is that the liability falls on the person who has a deep pocket. Now coming to the definition of vicarious liability, the master is liable for the acts of the servant done in the course of employment. Now the act involves the criminal acts of the servant as well. There are three elements in the definition of vicarious liability. One, the course of employment. Second, who is the servant. The third is the acts. Course of employment. Now the servant has an authorized act by the master. He does an authorized act in an unauthorized way, or he does an act incidental thereto. Now, if the act of the servant falls in any of these three elements, the master becomes liable for the acts of the servant. The second, who is a servant? A servant is someone who is under the control of the master. Third, what are the acts of the servant? Let's cover four main elements in the acts of the servant. The first, carelessness. Now the servant is negligent in doing an authorized act. Let's take an example of the case. The case is Century Insurance Company versus Northern Ireland Road Transport. In this case, the driver was transporting a petrol from a petrol tank to another tank. He lit a matchstick and he threw it on the floor. Now this caused a conflagration and an explosion which caused a damage to the property of P. Now when it caused a damage to the property, the defendants were held liable because the driver was negligent in his acts. Second, the mistake of the servant. Now the servant is misguided. Let's take an example of the case. Bailey versus Manchester Railway. The porter of the railway company mistook P to be travelling in a wrong train. He pulled him off the train without his permission. Now P was injured and he missed his train. So the railway company was held liable for the acts of the servant, that was the porter. Third, willful wrong of the servant. Now there are two elements in the willful wrong of the servant which he does in an authorized manner, which is forbidden by the master. Secondly, it benefits the servant. Let's take an example of a case. Limpus versus London General Company Omnibus Company. The driver had printed instructions not to obstruct or race with the other buses. Now the driver did not observe this. He caused a collision with the other buses. The master was held liable for the act of the servant. Fourth, the criminal act of the servant. Now the master is liable in the case of theft, assault or fraud. These are three important elements where the master becomes liable, else the master is not liable for the other criminal acts of the servant. Now a servant is different from an independent contractor. An independent contractor is not under the control of the master. But if the employer itself acts in a breach of duty, he delegates it to the independent contractor, then the master becomes liable. Now the employer has to provide competent staff, adequate materials for the independent contractor, else the master again becomes liable. The third important principle is that if the employer personally interferes and gives direction to the employer, then he becomes liable. We hope the video was informative. Thank you for watching.
Hope the information contained in this video was useful to you. We look forward to each one of your support and cooperation in making this initiative a success. For more details about the trust, do visit us at www.legalytrust.in. Kindly subscribe this channel and click on the bell icon to get the latest updates about various law-related educational videos. Thank you for watching us and have a good day.